Yeah. So I wasn't sure. So I asked Leah what she thinks, and she said that this is something that people think about. We just mentioned your name. Um, yeah, I mean, anyone who, reads through the Bible, you read through the Torah, you know, you see the death penalty. It's something which is written quite often. And, in a modern society that we live in today, it could make people very uncomfortable. The concept, is this only an ancient thing, or what is, or, as many of the Bible critics will use this as one of their points to sort of speak, against the Torah, saying, well, if God is loving and compassionate, how could there be death penalty and all of that? But then there's the moral question of, what is the right thing to do? If someone commits, some heinous crime, what is the moral thing to do? Is it to, you know, give them their true justice, to give them their, or is it for the purpose of protecting society? Or if yes, what is the reason or the purpose of giving someone the death penalty? And in modern civil, law, there is, the concept of, the death row, and people, sit there for many, many years waiting to be killed. But what's interesting is we'll see that while the Torah definitely does have the concept of the death penalty, but once we get into it, to seeing the full picture, we'll see that it's actually very different in some ways than the way modern society has the death penalty. Now, also another thing is that the Torah, the Torah doesn't have death penalty nowadays. It doesn't exist. It was only in temple times. The Jewish courts nowadays do not have the power to do the death penalty, because you have to have the Sanhedrin, it's called, 71 judges sitting in the temple. Only when you have the Supreme Court sitting in the temple, then do the courts have the power to administer capital punishment. However, about 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, when the Sanhedrin was exiled from the temple, actually they purposely left because they saw that murder was so, unfortunately, so common. They saw it wasn't even helping anymore to give the death penalty. It wasn't, people were just doing it. So like, let's leave the temple. Let's just, in order to sort of avoid doing this death penalty, which is anyways not working. But there's a lot, it's sort of opening a can of worms. And we decided, like you said, you want a heavy topic. And it's important to, I think one of the things that we try to accomplish with this class is to each week choose a different topic. And sometimes we'll choose topics that are the type of things that you wouldn't necessarily think or talk about on a regular basis, when you're sitting over dinner. But some of these questions can be sort of lingering in the back of our mind or come up occasionally. And it's important, at least at one point, to sort of unpack it, uncover the carpet, take whatever is under the carpet, bring it to the surface, talk about it, get clarity, get some answers, get some deeper, because there is a lot of depth. We've got 20 pages here, just to, so there is a lot here to unpack, whether we'll be able to cover it all tonight. Probably not, but we'll see what we could. So there's four things we're going to, so basically the overall question we're going to be talking about is that, on the one hand, we know that how in Judaism, life is the most sacred thing. We say that, violate any commandment just to save a life. And taking a life is considered, the most severe thing that can be done. On the other hand, if someone, does such heinous crimes or whatever it is, or severe sins, is just giving them, putting them in prison or giving them some sort of fine that they have to pay a penalty, is that enough? That's the question we're going to talk about. So again, when you just read the Bible, very sort of surface level, you see, it almost seems as if like the Torah very almost like carelessly just, do this, shall be murdered, shall be put to death, shall be put to death. But when you see the full picture, the Torah comes together, the written Torah with the oral Torah. In the oral Torah, there's an entire tractate called Sanhedrin, the tractate of Sanhedrin, which is, the Sanhedrin is the Jewish Supreme Court, both in the Mishnah and the Talmud, which the entire tractate is all about these laws. And we're actually going to be bringing some of the quotes from the Sanhedrin so the oral Torah gives you a more full picture. And what we'll discover, one of the things we'll discover is that in order for the Jewish court to administer capital punishment, there's a lot of red tape that has to be passed in order for a person to really get the capital punishment. There's so many details that have to be, only if all those criteria are met, which is very, very rare, only then is the punishment administered. And when it is, then it has to be done. It's a mitzvah, and it can't be, the court cannot, try to avoid it, say, oh, they have to do it. It's a mitzvah, it's a commandment, but it's a very rare thing. In fact, let's jump ahead. It says 2.1. A Sanhedrin that executes one person in 7 years is called destructive. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says one person in 70 years. It means it was, if a Sanhedrin killed one person in 7 years, that was considered like a bad court. And some people say even once in 70 years. So we're talking about a very, yes.
How long for?
So the first temple was 410 years. And then there was a 70-year break of the Babylonian exile. That's the time when the story of Purim happened, Queen Esther, Persian, and then they came back to build the second temple, which lasted for 420 years.
Well,
420 years. So the first temple was 410 years. The second one was 420 years. So in total, about just over 800 years.
okay.
And as I said, 40 years before the destruction of the second temple, the Sanhedrin left. They resigned basically from their job.
They
left the Jerusalem.
Yeah, but there were other
There were other courts.
cults that separated. Isn't that the time that people there were groups that escaped to the desert?
Yeah.
And the Isim, the
Essenes, yeah.
Yes. So that's if you're familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls, yes. So those were written by, which was the Cairo Geniza.
Yeah.
My father's a bit of a researcher, so he's did a very in-depth research into the Cairo Geniza. When he came here to visit us, not this time, but the time before, he went to Cambridge University, where they've got the Cairo Geniza in the Cambridge University, and he got special access to be able to view some of the scrolls. So those were from the.
Are there some in the British Museum?
Could be, yes. The British Museum has a lot of Jewish things from Egypt and so forth. Okay, so the 4 questions we're going to be talking about today. Number 1, what is the Torah's basic view about the death penalty in general? Why does the Torah make it easy or difficult? Well, hint, hint, it's difficult to actually carry out the death penalty. But then the main question, which I want to actually focus the most on, is what is the purpose for the death penalty? Why does the Torah allow that to happen, and what is the reason why? So, if we can just open up as a general question, what would you say is the purpose for, let's say someone commits murder? Should we kill, if you kill one person, does it bring the victim back to life? It doesn't, right? So should we kill? What would be the moral thing? If someone, let's say, commits murder, should they be killed, or maybe just life in prison or something else? And if yes, why should they be killed? Why should they have the death penalty? What would you think?
I mean, there are different situations. Like you said, every case has to be looked at itself. I mean, take for example the 7th of October murderers. I mean, they're different to somebody who killed somebody in a street fight. So
when you say street fight, do you mean that it was accidental, or that it was purposeful, but it just wasn't part of a bigger, with purpose, but it wasn't part of a bigger, putting a whole country at risk or whatever it is? No, because in the Torah there is actually difference between what's called mazid, which means intentional, and shogeg, which means unintentional.
Yeah.
So, for example,
and also in Torah, there is first degree murder and what do you call the manslaughter?
Right.
So there's different degrees of guilt.
Correct. So you're saying that even in intentional murder, there's also there is also differences.
To the intentional murder,
There are differences.
yeah, yeah.
I guess now as well, like,
What's the
it doesn't mean
what's the
like,
purpose?
Purpose.
Because they get,
they get like, what, 20-something years now
Killing
in
someone.
this country.
right,
What does it achieve apart from fulfilling a revenge?
Revenge.
right. This is the question, right?
To put it bluntly, somebody who can, I don't want to repeat in details what happened in the 7th of October, but if somebody can do what they did, they're not humans, they do not deserve to live. That's
Yeah,
my opinion. In that case, not every case.
No, hang on, but what's the purpose?
What's the purpose, right?
Killing them? Is this to give you satisfaction?
No. Don't twist shit like this, Avi. It's not. It's because they are, you know.
Well, this is the core question. What is it? So one option is revenge. One option is to protect society. If you've got an evil person roaming around society, and then the third reason could be to teach a lesson to society that people will see, well, if this is what happens, maybe that will prevent it from happening in the future.
Maybe to give closure to the people.
Or to give closure to the family. Or there could be a fifth reason, which is hint, hint. There is a fifth reason, which is none of the reasons that were mentioned above.
Can I just jump
Yes.
forward 3,000 years?
Yeah, sure.
Israel has used capital punishment on 2 occasions.
And we don't get into politics here,
No,
but
no.
I do believe that it was brought up recently in the Knesset,
Yeah.
the question of capital bullying.
Deterrence now, they were bringing in the death penalty for terror, so that they can use
As a prisoner swap.
If there's no terrorist
Don't use
swap,
pass.
is it not?
I don't think so.
They
I have passed.
Yeah, I
they
thought
have
so.
lost it to the level that Ben-Gvir and his guys are wearing a hanging noose on their dash. And that really brings what I want to really get into. Is it moral if we say that you shouldn't take a life for any governing body, for any judgment people, for a nation to say it's not okay for you to do it, but we are allowed to kill? We are allowed to take life because of whatever. Is Big Sanhedrin, have they got the moral authority to say, on one hand, life is sacred, are we allowed to take it?
So they don't actually, so generally speaking, the Torah has very, very specific guidelines for everything. So the Sanhedrin don't just wake up and say, oh, I don't like that person, so I'm going to decide to kill them. There are specific violations in the Torah, 36 in total, that are capital punishment. Outside of that, there is an additional thing, which is that in extreme circumstances, the Torah says that the court does have the power to take judgment in their own hands, even if it's outside of the scope of the 36 transgressions, that if it's a case where the whole society, something like October 7th type of thing, where it's affecting the entire society, then the court does have the power to take to use their own judgment to carry out any sort of punishment, whether it's now the question is whether this applies today. So we're going to get to the question of today, whether anyone today, both Jewish courts or what's the Torah's view on civil courts to have capital punishment. So in other words, from a halachic Torah perspective, what is our view on whether the local civils, secular authorities should have the power to think? And just to spill the beans, it's actually an argument between two very, very leading rabbis of the 21st century, or the 20th century, shall I say, who debated this question whether, here in America or in Britain, whether the Torah's view is to allow the government to have capital punishment. But there was Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik, he was the very, very famous rabbi, the head of the OU and the modern Orthodox movement in America. And then on the other hand, there was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was probably the leading authority post-Holocaust in America. And he wrote a letter to actually President Reagan about this. It's not 100% sure who the letter was to, It was to some very high officials, and people say that it was most likely written to President Reagan, where he basically said that yes, that is specifically murder, because the debate was the linkage between saying that we only have in the Torah we say that the court only has the power to give capital punishment when the Sanhedrin is in the temple. But when the Sanhedrin is not in the temple, like nowadays, we don't have the power. Question is that only speaking about a Jewish court? That only a Jewish court is limited to that criteria, that only when we have the temple, then we can administer. But what about secular courts? So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said, yes, that secular courts, they don't have that limitation, and they could carry out capital punishment specifically for cases of murder. So we can read that. There's a very interesting letter at the end. Rabbi Soloveitchik, if you want to jump to that, or you can jump to the very end. It's actually so let's jump to, we're going a bit out of order, but that's okay. 4.1. So number 4.1, so it goes in order. So this is from the Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin. Again, everything from here is all from Tractate Sanhedrin. 40 years before the destruction of the temple, the Sanhedrin was exiled from its place and sat in the marketplace, meaning that they no longer judged capital cases. The Rabbeinu Chananel explains, since they saw that bloodshed has become cheap in the eyes of the people and murderers had increased, they said, let us rise and leave this place. So that is the sort of when they drew the line in the sand. Now,
so from then on, they could not.
They could not.
Someone to death.
Correct. However, let's see the Rambam, for example, in 4.4. Do you want to read, Stuart?
Sure. The court has authority to give lashes to one who is not liable for lashes, and to execute one who is not liable for death, not to violate Torah, but to make a safeguard for Torah. When the court sees that the people have become unrestrained in a matter, they may fence it in and strengthen the matter as they see fit. All of this is a temporary measure, not a law established for generations.
So we see this is something that they're saying that in very exceptional circumstances, the court does have power to take matters into their hand and decide based on extreme circumstances that something has to be done, but it's not the general rule. So
I don't understand how the court has authority to give lashes to one who is not liable for lashes.
Yeah.
meaning to say,
And they execute one, that's going to bother me. That.
yeah, it means to say that in other words, outside the scope of when the Torah says this prohibition has that sort of punishment or so, but let's say people are just acting, they do things that are, I don't know, let's say there's a mob roaming the streets and creating havoc. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that if mobs roam the street, give them lashes. That's what I mean. In those sorts of circumstances, they can say, look, this is creating, problems for the community, and therefore they can take matter down. However, the Shulchan Aruch, which is the code of Jewish law, says this does not apply to death penalty. It only applies to giving penalties and things like that. So 4.7. Do you want to read, Avi? This is Rabbi Soloveitchik, letter regarding capital punishment from the 1970s.
It is irresponsible and unfair to submit a statement in favor of capital punishment in the name of Orthodox Jewry. In my humble opinion, from halachic point of view, every Jew should be opposed to capital punishment. It is true that the Torah recognizes capital punishment. However, the Torah delegates the authority to mete out capital punishment only to Sanhedrin, not to anyone else. If Sanhedrin are not able to mete out capital punishment, if there is no temple. This is based on the teaching that when the priests offer sacrifices, capital punishment exists. But if sacrifices are not offered, capital punishment no longer exists. Even capital punishment among non-Jews cannot be meted out when there is no temple.
So that's Rabbi Soloveitchik. So he doesn't want to give sort of a stamp of approval that, he was, the Torah leading authority that, we allow capital punishment. He didn't want to give that stamp. However, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, as I mentioned, so he wrote a letter. Atalia, you want to read 4.8?
It is impossible to adjudicate capital cases unless the Holy Temple is standing and the great Sanhedrin of 71 sages, who possesses the highest authority, sits in the chamber of hewn stone within the temple. Yet all of this applies only when the prohibition against murder has not become utterly lawless, and the perpetrator committed the act out of some intense passion, a financial dispute, or a matter of honor. However, if someone commits murder because the prohibition has become entirely meaningless to them, and they are exceptionally cruel, or similarly, during times when murderers or evildoers have proliferated, the courts could institute emergency measures to prevent further acts of murder for the sake of preserving society.
So this is for the sake of preserving society. So this is actually the point that you mentioned before, that it does actually matter. Like if you have like the mafia, they're going to go and, someone didn't pay back, money that they owed, and they're going to go and sort of take matters in their own hands. It's obviously it's cruel and it's evil, and they've killed someone, they've taken a life. There's nothing can be worse than that. But that can be compared to something when, the whole society is just becoming completely, like in America where guns, and there's just, so many story after story. You open up the news and there's been a shooting here and mass killings and this and that. And like the whole society is becoming, it's not safe to walk in the streets anymore. That is different. Oh yeah, we will get to that.
Absolutely.
We will, yeah.
The results.
Right.
Because what we do see is, even though in states capital punishment is being carried out every so often, and it's definitely
Doesn't seem that it's working.
it's definitely not working.
Right.
It's still much worse than in other places where capital punishment
Right.
is not.
All right. So that's actually so let's jump back. So
No punishment whatsoever, is it?
right. So this is going to be the main thing we're going to discuss soon. But before that, actually, I want to actually get into some of the details. This is all from Tractate Sanhedrin as to what are the red tapes, what are the criteria, the details that have to be met in order for someone to actually be liable to capital. Because again, when you just read the surface level, you read the Bible, it says, someone who does, this thing shall be killed. It seems like boom, 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 every left, right, and center, just killing people.
Yeah.
Even seemingly minor things.
Seemingly minor.
Or not minor, but seemingly non-violent, or like, someone's,
Like in the parashat of Shavuot.
Yeah, that's why we're learning it, because it's this week. It's so there's some of the examples are and some of the main examples that have in the Torah capital punishment, like I said, is 36 in total. So you've got a lot of them are to do with incest and immorality and sexual relations, but like really, really bad ones. Without getting into details, and you can read it. It's all in the Torah. Idol worship, murder, kidnapping, and then selling the kidnapped person. Then you have like blasphemy, false prophets. So those are some of the examples. So this is what a lot of this was from the oral Torah, which was given over, as I said, as part of the first of all, there are in the Torah 4 types of capital punishment. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, so it's
And hereg, which is without getting too graphic. Well, it is graphic, unfortunately. Is everyone familiar with them? With the 4 types of? I'd rather not say. You can read it, it's in here.
That's the one in the Bible.
Yeah, skila.
Skila was
Wait, murder.
Now,
Yeah.
Used to have people in a hole in the ground with just their heads sticking out. Those stones at it.
Okay.
now what's interesting is that it says
Big stone.
What's interesting? Each of the 4 types of punishment. So it's stoning, burning,
Burning.
well, not burning, it's not really burning, actually. I'll explain in a moment.
Okay.
Hereg, which is execution, and strangling. Now, each of those four, the Talmud explains that we learn from, it's all we learn from verses. It says that you should love your fellow as yourself. You know, it's a mitzvah, love your fellow as yourself. It says the Talmud, this applies even to someone who is liable to a death penalty. You have to love him as well. And therefore, the Talmud learns that we have to give him the easiest, most painless type of way of killing, and also in a dignified way. There's a lot of details. I don't really want to go into all the details, but in each of the four things, the Talmud goes into very, very great detail. For example, when it comes to stoning, what level? They do it in a way that is, they throw him off a 2-story building, but it speaks specifically why 2-story, not 3 and not 1, because that is what gives the fastest way for the person to die. Without getting in the same thing with burning, it doesn't mean to burn their body. No, it's not pleasant at all. It's all, yeah.
Burning doesn't mean
Burning doesn't mean burning. It means pouring lead down the throat. So the sort of the body, the physical body doesn't get this, it's, and then whatever, there's a lot of details, but let's back up a moment. This is, as we said, an extremely uncommon thing. 1 in 7 years or 70 years is considered a murderous court. What are the criteria that needs to be done? So if someone does one of these transgressions, there has to be, first of all, 2 witnesses, kosher witnesses, which means there have to be 2 people who saw the person doing the transgression at the same time. The court will have to interrogate them with a very, very scrutinizing interrogation to make sure that if there's any contradiction between them, for example, they'll say like, what color shoes was he wearing? And if they don't match up with any detail, boom, they're gone.
Beyond reasonable doubt.
Very much so. So first of all, you have to have 2 witnesses. Now, that's not enough. The 2 witnesses have to warn the person to say, do you know that if you do this transgression, you will be punished, you will be killed.
If they hadn't warned them.
If they hadn't warned him,
he didn't know it was wrong.
Even if he did know, if there weren't 2 witnesses that saw him do it and warned him, and not only warned him that you can't do this, but told him that, do you know that if you do this, you're going to be killed? And he has to answer back within a 3-second time frame saying, yes, I know that, and that's the reason why I'm doing it. In other words, with a rebellious intent. Not only full consciousness, but with a rebellious intent. In other words, he says, yes, I'm doing the transgression with that intention, that I know that I'm doing the transgression and that I will be liable to death penalty. And the 2 witnesses have to see him do the act itself. So let's say if you're talking about immoral relations, if they're somewhere in a bedroom, whatever, no, that doesn't count. The witnesses have to actually witness the act. You can imagine. So the Talmud says a story. There was one time a rabbi by the name of Shimon ben Shattach, one of the rabbis in the Talmud. He says he saw a man running after someone with a knife into a deserted inn. And a few minutes later, the man came out with a bloody knife and there was a dead person on the floor. No one else. Right? No one else in sight. It was just the 2 of them. So Shimon ben Shattach says, look, either you or I killed him. Who was it? But there were no 2 witnesses. So he doesn't get the penalty, right? So he says, although the courts cannot punish you, but the Hashem is the ultimate judge. And even if the court down here can't punish, Hashem will extract judgment. And then it says that a poisonous snake came and bit the man.
So it's the death penalty or nothing. It's not like
Correct.
They give him some other sentence.
No.
That's it.
That was what I was going to ask, because I was just thinking about how in countries now with Sharia law, they say like if a woman is raped, that they have to have like 5 male witnesses, or it doesn't have prosecuted. So like which obviously is insane, but like with this, is there an application, like is there anything discussion about other punishments other than the death penalty for like how many witnesses are needed for?
Not when it comes to death penalty. There is differences when it comes to civil cases, like monetary cases, disputes and stuff. So then there is differences. If you've got 1 witness, there's a concept of 1 witness or 2 witnesses. There are differences. But when it comes to death penalty, it's all or nothing.
Yeah, I think I remember many years ago reading that the 2 women, it came out at the time, and there was abject lawlessness is a very primitive time.
So the Rambam
Revolution.
explains why this is so important. He says, because if you allow circumstantial evidence, then ultimately it can sort of lead to a spiral where, first we're relying on this level of evidence, let's say 99%. But then if you rely on that, then you'll rely on 95% and then 90%. And before you know it, you'll just be going based on assumptions. And it will, so therefore the line is there. And if you fit the criteria, there's, and if not, then there's nothing. It's interesting what the Torah would say nowadays with things like CCTV and DNA evidence and all that sort of thing. The Torah is very specific. There has to be 2 live witnesses who saw the act and warned them. It has to be what's called in halachic term, there's something called teich kedei dibur, which means it has to be within about a 3-second period where he has to be able to say yes and then do the sin and all
When you
that.
say kosher witnesses, kosher witnesses, do they have to be Jewish? Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Well,
I think so.
well, it's not.
But these courts don't exist.
What?
These Jewish courts.
No, I said not for capital punishments. There is Jewish courts for civil and marriage and all sorts.
Have experience.
But yes, there is Jewish courts, but not for capital. No.
It's almost like they say you really should have the death penalty, but then they're making it almost impossible.
Almost impossible.
So,
Yeah.
Should Feinstein say that? So based on from what you just said, that seems impossible for somebody.
For a Jewish court, but the civil court doesn't have those criteria.
It's 2 separate things.
Yeah. Yes.
We're keeping it completely.
Yeah, and also he was saying specifically for specific extreme measures of murder where it becomes so careless. So like he was speaking about America, he was speaking about what was happening in America then, and now still he was referring to that. So it's separate from sort of the Jewish law and then the civil law. And he was supporting it. He was saying that it's just like we mentioned that Okay, so that's not the end of it. Now, let's say 2 witnesses come forth to the court and they say, okay, yes, we saw somebody who's done this. We're going to testify. So we said, first of all, there is very, very strict cross-examination. That's the first thing. Then there's a process again how the court prosecutes. So first of all, you have to have a majority. Normally, we say you follow the majority, but when it comes to capital punishments, it can't be a small majority. When it comes to like winning over the Knesset, you can be 61 against 6. There has to be a overwhelming majority. It can't just be a majority of 1. It has to be at least a majority of 2. It has to be a larger majority that says that he's liable. Very interesting law. It says if all the judges, every single one, so we're talking about a court of 23, minimum a court of 23, and we said there has to be a majority of 2 for someone to be liable. Now, let's say you have 11 and 12. You've got a dispute. 11 say he's not guilty and 12 say he is guilty. Then you add more judges. You keep adding more judges till you come to 71 judges. Is the
Wow.
So they have to hear it all over again.
Yes. Then is very interesting law. It says that if all the judges, every single one, say that he is guilty, then the person is exempt. In other words, there has to be a balance where some say he's guilty, some say he's not guilty, and if it's unanimous, there's something missing. Something's not right. There's a blind spot because every person has some element of merit. So if there is no element of merit, that means that we've gone wrong, and the answer, and then the person is exempt. A very interesting law.
I guess in the Jewish court, it's supposed to be like.
There has to be different. Yeah. Then the way the court opens up the court case is it begins with saying, can anyone find merit? So we start off with the merit. And then if anyone, even if there's like there was the actual judges, and then in merit of the no to merit the person. In other words, we begin with saying, is anyone here that can defend the person to be exempt?
Something like that, to say that he's got good sides of his character.
Something some basis that will allow him to be exempt. It says even if there's you have the actual judges, like the main judges, then you've got the students who are like, you call the apprentices who are training to be judges. They would sit there and watch the cases. But it says even if one of the students would say, oh, you imagine all the judges like, yes, he's guilty. And then one of these sort of inexperienced students says, oh, I think I've got we say, come up to the podium, please, we want to try to find any merit possible.
All right.
So then, okay, I'm going through a lot of this. It's stuff that is written here, but I'm just going through it. Now, also, it says that you have to start, when you look at all the judges, each one says their view. In other words, they discuss, and then each one goes through, they say guilty or not guilty. And then each one says their verdict, and then they count up the majority. So when they go through the judges, they start from the lowest or the youngest or till the highest. Because if they start with the head judge, everyone is going to copy. Everyone will be influenced by his thing. So you start the other way around with the most inexperienced or the youngest or whatever, and then you ask everyone their opinion.
That's better, no?
It's very about my training, that's sort of leadership and management. So
Oh, yeah.
it's
Now-
the pyramid style is the top dictating to anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
Or does everyone has an opinion that influences the decision on the top?
Almost democracy.
Now, even after a conviction happens and a person is, they've done this, they've got the majority, it's done, and all the criteria was met, it's not over. So as the person is sort of led to his execution, yes, there's announcements that go out, so nowadays it would be posting in all the WhatsApp groups. If anybody can find the merit, maybe there's somebody who saw or who knows him, they give up to the very last moment, they put announcements. If anybody is able to come and find a merit for him, please come forward. And if anyone comes, even if it seems like the most bizarre, alibi or whatever it is, we say pause, we reconvene, we go back to the court, and we start all again. And then they go again, and if it happens again, they go back. And there's no limits how many times they would go back.
Saying that if anyone finds any merit whatsoever with this guy, maybe
For example,
to children or he fed.
No,
It's
that
just specific
saying-
on the case.
on the case. So, for example, someone will come and say, well, the two witnesses that think, well, I think he was with my cousin on vacation, that day. Maybe maybe he wasn't really there. That sort of thing. So we need to go and go into cross-examination again and to figure out that it's that sort of thing. Then, now, again, if all that happens and there's a mitzvah, the person has to be executed right away. Unlike death row, where people will live for, they don't know when it's going to happen. First of all, there's a sense of cruelty and torture that they don't know. And sometimes it's like, if someone's at that point, it's more painful to live than not to live. They don't know when, every day they wake up, they don't know when it's going to happen. It's like torture.
Yeah.
But we're going to go into much deeper. We're going to go now into the question of, okay, what all of this, okay, we understand that it's a very rarity and it's almost impossible to happen. But at the end of the day, the Torah says that if this and this happens, they have to be executed. It's a mitzvah, it's a commandment. They have to, and it says even if witnesses saw someone do a crime, they cannot avoid coming to testify. They can't say, oh, I don't want to testify because I don't want to cause someone to get, harm.
Yeah.
It's not allowed. It's an avera. You have to, if you saw something, you must go and testify.
I wonder if it's true these days as well. I mean,
Right.
if you happen to see something that's not right, you always report it. Sometimes people just walk away.
They take pictures
Um,
of our phones.
Often a lot, I would say.
Yeah. So they get involved.
So again, in Torah times, it's you have to, which is interesting. The balance of here. On one hand, justice has to be served. On the other hand, we say that we value life so much that we're going to. So, and here's actually a very interesting quote from the Rambam. He says, 2.5, the last sentence of 2.5 from the Rambam. It is better and more desirable to acquit 1,000 guilty people than to execute one innocent person. And he would rather save 1,000 people that are guilty to not kill them than to, God forbid, kill one person. So the scrutiny is so, the level of scrutiny is so high because we want to make sure that, God forbid, we don't.
Which is one of the morality, the death penalty in part of the world,
Is
saying that how often will the court get it wrong? And
Even if there's a 1% chance that they get it wrong, it's too much.
Some person.
Right. And then the last thing is that, as I mentioned before, is that even when we do carry out a thing, again, sorry for all the graphic details, but the Talmud goes into great detail that they choose the most painless ways possible within the context of each of the things. So, and also they administer to the person a narcotic in order to make him basically not feel the pain. So in those days, it was like wine mixed with some spice stuff. And nowadays, it would just be like drug him up so he doesn't actually feel the pain.
Injection, the
Yeah.
little injection.
Yeah.
How do they decide which of
The Torah says, in the Torah, it says, depending on the transgression, yeah. And it is, and it is actually, there is like, there is an element of measure for measure where certain transgressions match up with certain types of death penalties. It's this is going a little bit off topic. It's kind of fascinating in a way, but morbidly fascinating that the Talmud goes into it. The Kabbalah goes into the Arizal, where the human body is made up of 4 elements. There's water, earth, fire, and air, and the 4 death penalties are corresponding to those 4. So you've got the fire, you've got strangling, which is taking out their ear. You've got stoning, which is earth, and the other one is fire.
Sword. Oh.
And then the sword is water. Why? Yes, because of the blood. Thank you. Because of the blood source. It's cut off the now, and then also a person's. So right now we're going to go into the main question, which is, okay, we understand that it's very uncommon and there's scrutiny because we value a life. We don't want to make mistakes, but why? Right? This is your question.
People who argue for capital punishment nowadays say, what do you want? It says eye for eye.
Yeah. That's not literal. Do you know that?
It's what?
The Talmud explains, the oral Torah explains that when it says in the written Torah, eye for an eye, it doesn't mean literally that you knocked out someone's eye, so you get your eye knocked out. It doesn't mean that. That's the wrong meaning of the verse. It means you have to pay the value of an eye. How do you know the value of an eye? So again, in olden days on the slave market, what would be a slave with an eye versus a slave without an eye? What would be the difference in cost? That's the amount of money you need to pay if someone accidentally knocks out your eye. That's what it means. It means you have to pay the compensation for the monetarily. That's what it means. Okay, but the main question is, okay, well, so even if it's very rare, but why? Why is it for revenge? We said, is it for closure? Is it for protecting society? Or is it to teach a lesson? Or is it something else, right? So this is the real question. So if the purpose was just closure for the victim's family, it wouldn't be enough because and sorry to be this is, I don't know, some of you may know my family story, but I actually this is very close to heart because I have a brother who was murdered. Yeah.
Wow.
Many years ago. It was in America. It was a random shooting, and
When was that?
about 6 years ago.
Ah,
Yeah.
what was it? Anti-Semitic?
It wasn't anti-Semitic. It was a crazy lunatic going around with a gun just randomly. And it was, obviously it was very, very tragic, of course, but the question arose, unfortunately they didn't catch the guy.
I didn't.
They didn't catch him. They had like CCTV a bit from the back of his they saw the back of his, they saw certain features. He was black. And but they didn't find him, and then nothing ever happened. But it's interesting because in the family we were speaking about, like, ultimately, even if they would find him, that wouldn't bring our brother back. So what's the like? Does it even matter? They put a very big monetary award for anyone that would find him. But like ultimately, like we have to grieve because the person who was killed is gone. Nothing's going to bring him back. So the question is, if the reason for killing someone who was killing or murder is just for closure for the family, is that enough of a reason to kill another person, especially a Jew? The answer is no, it's not.
Yeah.
That alone isn't enough of a reason. Then another reason is, deterrence and public protection. That seems like a more legitimate reason, right? However, the Torah goes even deeper and says that's not, while there is element of that, but some of the transgressions in the Torah that have capital punishment are not murder. Some of them are, non-violent crimes, something that was done in private. Why, how can you explain and justify, what would be the reason that the Torah should say that someone should be killed for that? So there has to be something more. And the answer is, in one sentence, is that this punishment is a repair for the person's soul. In Hebrew, it's called tikkun. It's to repair the person's soul. So sometimes a person can do something and they can still live, and through repentance or suffering or some sort of thing that they do in this world, they can have they can be repentance is a big thing. We have Yom Kippur every year. We pray, and God is a forgiving, all merciful and forgiving God, and He forgives us. But certain things are so bad that the only way the soul can be cleansed and repaired is by the person's physical life ending. And why is that? It's because we believe that life doesn't end in this world. There is life beyond this world. If a person dying would be the end of it all, then there would be no purpose in killing a person. But if we believe that there is a world to come, so it says that before they take a person out to execution, they tell the person to say vidui, which is to repent. And if he doesn't know what to say, then we'll read it inside. It's there to confess. They say, if he doesn't know what to say, then he should say, "May my death be an atonement for all my sins." And by doing that, he gets a share in the world to come. So even the most cruel person who is going to his execution will have a share in the world to come, because his execution was in other words, he got his just. So this is it's a very, very heavy topic to uncover, but let's read inside.
Isn't this what we're done to us?
What?
Isn't this what we're just done to us? It's about Christians. Saying we burn you to fix your soul, and they feel depressed.
Well, that's the Christians that they're coming and deciding for us that we should burn. Over here, we're saying that. Okay. So what's your question?
I'm saying I question
The premise of
the justification
for
that you, by killing someone, you can help them to take part in the next world. I'm saying.
Right. So we're not taking this into our own hands. We're saying this is what's written in the Torah. So we're not saying, you deserve to die because I decided so, and you need to die in order to go to heaven. I'm not deciding that. It's God who created the world, who created us. He's the one who decided that. He wrote it in the Torah.
The reason someone is reincarnated is because they've committed a sin and they need to do a tikkun in the next life. So I guess by ending their life there, then you're giving them
So this is a very
So then we need to
yeah.
So does this apply to Jewish
Yes.
criminals?
Pretty much, yes.
So what happens with others?
Again, this is specific. This is in the Torah. So let's say in the land of Israel in temple times, if there was a non-Jew living among them, and he did a crime of no, because the non-Jews don't have the commandments that we do. But if he commits murder, which is one of the 7 Noahide laws, which we learned about, it doesn't fall in the same category. Like I said, the court does have the power in very extreme circumstances, measures to take, to administer a punishment. But generally speaking, the Torah, this is written for Jews. Unfortunately, this is why when converts want to convert, we tell them, "Are you sure you want to do this? You'd be better off if you don't."
Is there any?
Has the Torah or Judaism has this view on capital punishment of non-Jews?
Good question.
So those rabbis, they give an argument.
For example, if some. Yeah.
Was that?
It was about.
For every human being, for every person?
Yeah, but they were speaking specifically about murder. They were speaking about generally, but they were saying, what is the Torah's view on death penalty in in Western society today by civil law? What is Torah's view
The Torah's view applies to non-Jews.
for murder? For murder, yeah. What he's saying is, would the Jewish court come and say, you know, well, you're not Jewish, you don't believe in God, but we don't care about that because we do, and therefore we're going to come and, you know, tell you that you need a tikkun, so we're going to go and kill you. No, we don't do that.
Have gone to the non-Jewish courts.
Yeah, so there's one story that right. Well, during, you know, in Israel in temple times, the Sanhedrin had authority over the whole land of Israel, including the non-Jews that lived there.
Yeah, that's why I would have thought it was a non-Jew they would use the same criteria.
But non-Jews are not, they don't have the commandments
Yeah, I
that we
could
do.
see the Sanhedrin saying, "Oh, I'll just go and execute it." I think they'd use the same criteria.
So there was an
I'm sure
interesting,
that- Can I just?
Yeah.
Is there any allowance for someone who might be mental? Because it seems to me, if you're told by two people not to kill him, so I'm still going to kill him, and I know.
yes, yeah, there
It would
is.
seem a mental, and therefore that it was.
Yes, and by the way, the reason why there's no capital punishment after the temple times, one of the reasons is because the Talmud, the rabbis explain is that we're spiritually more, we're on a lower level than they were thousands of years ago, and therefore any transgression that we do is considered accidental. So, like, in other words, we don't deserve to get even if someone does something nowadays intentional, like, oh, you know, I hate God because, you know, he's killed my grandparents in the Holocaust, so I'm going to go against God, and unfortunately that happens.
Yeah.
However, the explanation is that nowadays it doesn't matter. Even everything that anyone does nowadays is considered unintentional, to the extent that there's no justification for capital punishment nowadays. And that's the reason why there is no Sanhedrin nowadays to do capital punishment, because we're more what's the word?
Base, and then these people.
We're more
Got more insight into why people do things.
I think it's the other way around.
no, we have more spiritual insensitivity, in other words, where we
Lesser.
yeah,
They're not as spiritual as.
we're not as spiritual. So, like, you know, we don't see that if I do this, you know, consequence, it's damaging my soul. We don't feel that. We don't necessarily, you know that or feel that. So therefore, even if
But
whether it's intentionally or not, it's even the intentional is considered unintentional. Is that what I'm saying?
well,
Yeah.
We don't necessarily, there's a rabbi called Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Raditchev. So he was considered the defender of Israel. I mean, he always was there to, you know, after the Holocaust, there was always the questions, you know, what was the reason why the Holocaust happened? You know, and some rabbi said it's because the people did this or that. But the Rebbe said, no. Is our job to go and defend God? No, we're going to go and take God to court. We're going to go and be against God to say, how dare you do this, right? So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Raditchev, he was the defender of Israel. So he one time on Yom Kippur, he turned to God and he sort of spoke to God. He said, God, it's not fair. If you would take everything that's written in the holy books and put it physically in front of our eyes, that we see that, you know, it says in the Torah, you know, there's the path of good life and path of death, and choose life. If we would see clearly in front of our eyes physically how this is the truth, and all the temptations of the world hide somewhere in the books on the shelf, then it would be fair. But what you've done the opposite. The truth of the Torah that you've sort of hidden in the books on the shelf for some scholars to read, and the temptations of the world you put in front of our eyes. So it's not fair. So therefore, you can't write us in the book of so you're saying on Yom Kippur, you have to seal us in the book of life, because it's not just, not fair. This is what I'm saying. So that's the reason why there's no capital punishment nowadays, because spiritually we don't feel that, oh, if I, you know, do a sin, then I'm damaging my soul. We don't feel that. We're not spiritual enough to feel that. So therefore, we're not deserving of the punishment. And another thing is that there is a concept of here, let me turn to 3.4. This is from the Tanya. Isabel, I think you didn't read yet. Do you want to read?
If one commits a sin that is punished with excision or execution, repentance and Yom Kippur are tentative and suffering scours the sin. Is that right?
Yeah.
Scores.
Yeah, like it cleans, yeah.
This means that the suffering completes the atonement. Remarking, the expression here, denotes scouring and rinsing to polish the soul. Kapara, atonement, is the term for cleaning, removing the impurities of the sin.
What he's saying here is that nowadays, that there is no death penalty, we can actually in other words, God gives us many chances. He doesn't, say, you've done it, you're gone. We can repent, and we fast on Yom Kippur, and we repent, and we get many chances. And ultimately, when we have suffering in life, that suffering can be viewed as a way of cleansing the soul, instead of having to have, worse off punishments. So when we view, so many righteous people, when they had suffering in their life, they would say, there's even an expression in Hebrew, they say, kapara alecha, right? What does kapara alecha? It means it's used as it became a slang. But the real meaning of kapara alecha means that it's a kapara means an atonement.
Yeah.
Means that when something bad happens to a person, they say, oh, this shall be an atonement. So after something bad happens, they say, well, it was an atonement for my soul. So let's go back to 3.3. This is a letter from the Rebbe where 3.3, a letter from the Rebbe where someone asked the Rebbe about capital punishment. Someone was asking the Rebbe, many people, just in case you don't know, many people wrote letters, personal letters to the Rebbe, asking all sorts of questions, whether it was personal questions, advice, anything that was, really anything and everything. And they're all printed in, over 30 or 40 books, which we have in the other room. All the answers that the Rebbe would answer, everything from a child to a president, the Rebbe answered everyone in detailed letters. So here's one example, such example, where someone wrote to the Rebbe, how could the Torah have capital punishment? Doesn't matter if. So the Rebbe addressed his letter. So this is, do you want to read 3.3?
Now to answer at least one of your specific questions, namely the question of capital punishment, which is included in the Torah as one of the various forms of punishment, and which you question on the ground of compassion.
Meaning his question was, if God is compassionate, how could there be punishment, death penalty?
Actually, insofar as the principle is concerned, the same question could apply not only to capital punishment, but to any form of punishment. The only reason that capital punishment is sometimes objected to is the fact that where it concerns lesser forms of punishment, it is believed that the results of their punishment will outweigh many times the punishment itself, and will be for the benefit of the person punished, as well as for the society, etc. But this very principle can logically be extended also to capital punishment in a religion which believes in afterlife, where death is not the end of everything, but a transition to a higher life. To simplify the above by way of an illustration, when you take away a child from the middle of his game or play and compel him to sit down and do his lessons and study some matters which are of no personal interest to him in his way of thinking, he can see it only as an act of cruelty. The fact that years later his present studies will be very useful to him, of this he has no conception at this moment. All he can see is that he is arbitrarily dragged away from his game and from his pleasure at that moment. I do not think this illustration needs further elaboration.
Now this is Ben, are you here?
Yep.
Would you like to read 3.7? This is quite sort of not groundbreaking, but it's a very, very powerful sobering point. Do you want to read 3.7?
Sure. Everything commanded by Torah follows the principle of chesed, kindness, even the rules of punishment. Even when Torah provides for death penalty, its purpose is to bring about ultimate atonement. You will ask, how can the executed person fulfill his role in life? The answer is that in the case of a capital offender who has been sentenced to death, Torah rules Torah ruled that his mission must be revoked because by his own actions he has forfeited his role in doing the mission of God.
That is very so basically the big shift here is that in our worldly viewpoint, we see that every person has the basic right to live. And therefore, we get to have the right to enjoy life. And who are you to come and take that from me? However, if we believe in God and we believe that God created the world, well, it didn't just happen by accident. We weren't just created by accident. He created us. And if he created us for a purpose. And what was that purpose, you may ask? So if you go to 3.6, it's a one-liner, it's a sort of a heavy hitter. I was created to serve my master. In Hebrew, you can remember it. I was created to serve my master. In other words, this goes back to the overarching idea that we speak about in many lessons, that this world was created for a purpose. We speak about it from many different angles. The purpose of this world wasn't just created by accident, and we're not just living here for nothing. Everything is here for a bigger purpose, and we're all part of this mission together. Each one of us plays our unique role, and we're all needed for the general mission and purpose of why this world was created. So now God gives us many opportunities to utilize our purpose by utilizing our opportunities and our talents, and to make this world a better place, or whatever it is, to find our, we spoke about using the things that we come in contact with to elevate them, all the things that we do to make the world a better place and to ultimately fulfill the general purpose, which is to make the world a dwelling place for God. Okay. Now we have many opportunities to, when we mess up, to correct ourselves. Again, that's why we have Yom Kippur every year. We get a chance to say, let's reset. We can, and God, the Jewish people served golden calf 40 days after God revealed himself to Sinai. And even then, God said, what? God revealed to Moses, it's okay, I forgive the Jewish people, 13 attributes of mercy, which we say on Yom Kippur to remind God that he is merciful and he forgives us. However, certain very rare cases where a person has gone so far off that he basically forfeited his mission, where there is no way that he can continue his mission, and therefore allowing him to stay alive would have no purpose whatsoever.
But if God is responsible for everything, isn't he responsible for this guy going off the rail?
Again, we're not talking about somebody who's gone mental, like you mentioned, where there's reasons for that. We're talking about the most rebellious of rebellious, where they've,
Whose intention,
exactly.
conscious intention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about it in a way, that's the reason why the Torah says that if a person reaches that point, it's a commandment. They have to kill him right away. They don't keep him in death row forever, because it's enabling him to be cleansed, to get the not closure, but the cleansing, and to go to the world to come. Otherwise, he's just sitting there. And, imagine a person, it's the most terrible thing to imagine, of, sitting in their consciousness of knowing that they've committed the most heinous crimes. They cannot function in society any longer. Unfortunately, they've done the worst of the worst. They can't come back to their senses. There's no purpose, unfortunately. It's a very morbid thing to think about. For them, there's no purpose anymore for them to live, unfortunately. And that's the sad truth.
What does that say, though, about the person that committed a murder but isn't sentenced to death because of all the reasons?
Very good question. Okay, so to answer that, the answer is, this is the last part of the session, which is called divine justice, which means when there's the loopholes where the person, I'll take in the case of my brother, where they didn't find the murder, they didn't find the murderer. So it says that ultimately God is the ultimate judge, and he will exact justice. So there's one example the Talmud says to give an example, 5.2. So you mentioned before that there's in the Talmud, there's what's called intentional murder and unintentional murder. In the Torah, the punishment for intentional murder is death. Does anyone know what's the punishment for unintentional murder? An example, let's say somebody was, let's say, driving a car, right? And then they fell asleep on the wheel or whatever it is, and an accident and they killed someone. Unintentional murder. What is in the Torah? What is the Torah's punishment for such a crime? It's in this week's parsha. The answer is there's the concept called Arei Miklat, the cities of refuge. Have you heard of the cities of refuge? In Israel, there were 6 cities of refuge where basically the law is a very interesting law where the relatives of the victim are allowed to take basically action in their own hands and kill you, but you have the right to run away to the city of refuge. And if you come to the city of refuge, you're protected and no one's allowed to do anything to you. So there were 6 cities which were dotted across Israel. And it says there was actually signs on the highway saying, this way, this way. If you're running for your life, go this way, miklat, miklat. And as soon as a person comes to one of those cities, then for the rest of his life, he basically can stay there. It's like an exile, basically. He's not allowed to leave the city. But once he's in there, he's basically protected.
So I take it these were walled cities.
Well, not necessarily, but legally, no one's allowed. They're protected. So this is you read this week's parsha, read the Torah, Shoftim, you'll see it. So now, what happens if 2 people committed murder? One of them intentionally, like the story where the guy ran into the house where and there wasn't 2 witnesses. So let's say one guy committed murder intentionally, and someone else committed murder intentionally, but there was no witnesses. So we've got here 2 people who are roaming the streets, who none of them can receive their punishment. So. Stuart, do you want to read 5.2?
Yeah. Reish Lakish explains that the verse, "but God caused it to come to his hand," can refer to 2 people who killed, one unintentionally and one intentionally. Neither case had witnesses, so neither received the proper consequences. God brings them to the same inn. The intentional murderer sits beneath a ladder, and the one who killed unintentionally descends the ladder, falls on him, and kills him. There are now witnesses to this event. The intentional murderer is killed, and the unintentional killer is exiled. Each receives what he deserves.
So here's just an example of how ultimately justice is served. God will make one way or another, and we might not see this ourselves. You can see somebody, roaming freely. You think, whether it's terrorists or this or that, and then they weren't caught. But ultimately, God is the true judge. So one way or another, whether in this world or the next, who knows how or what or why, but ultimately, God is the ultimate judge. I want to conclude with an interesting story. This is like sort of the Rebbe in 1968 when the mission Apollo went up to the moon for the first time, and they came down. So the next day, the Rebbe gave a talk, and he actually used this story to explain a very fascinating idea. People can. The story was that basically there was a radio show, a talk radio show, and there was a rabbi giving where there was a sort of anyone can dial in and ask questions. Ask the rabbi. So someone asked this sort of moral question. If someone just goes and decides to eat a cheeseburger, I don't know, do some sort of sin. Why is it moral for the courts to just go and give him some sort of punishment, give him lashes or whatever it is? If I'm minding my own business, that was the question that he asked the rabbi. So the rabbi basically gave the answer that he was trying to sort of say, well, it's very uncommon because you have to have witnesses, and the same thing, witnesses and warning, and it's basically very uncommon, and it has to be done really intentionally and all of that. That was the answer. Then the next day, like I said, the Rebbe gave a talk, and the Rebbe said that ultimately the rabbi didn't really answer the question, because ultimately the question still remains. In the case that it does happen, even if it's very rare, why is it moral and just? So the Rebbe basically gave this analogy. The Rebbe said, look, you've got here the astronauts. There is Mission Apollo. And you've got, the whole country is rallying behind them. They've invested billions of dollars into this mission. And they chose a few select astronauts to be the ones to carry out the mission. And there's very strict rules when they're on the aircraft, when they're on the space shuttle, what they can wear and when to eat and how to behave. And, imagine one guy says, so imagine you've got, let's say, a ship. And this is actually a story the Medrash says. Imagine you've got a couple of people on a ship and someone pokes a hole underneath his seat. So his neighbor says, hey, we're going to drown. So he says, well, mind your business. I dug it under my seat, not under your seat. He's like, well, you dug the hole under your seat, but we're all affected by what you did. So think about these astronauts. They're doing. If one astronaut is going to say, who's going to? It's my personal business what I choose to do. Well, first of all, you're threatening the life of the other astronauts, and the whole mission is at risk. Now that is only a mission of flying to the moon. It's a big mission, but it's not. What we're talking about. We were chosen for a mission. We spoke a few weeks ago. We are the chosen people. What does it mean we're chosen? We were chosen for a mission. We're all part of it. All of us. We're all in it together. And whatever one of us does. In a way, this is actually very empowering because we believe that every action that one single person does affects everybody else. The Rambam says that you should view the world as a scale. And the scale is 50-50. One act that you do can tip the scale in either direction. So every person, we're carrying a very big responsibility. So
Is this for everyone or just the Jewish nation?
So we learned about this a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately, you weren't here. We spoke about the chosen people.
Right.
So we learned that basically the Jewish people were specifically chosen for this mission. However, non-Jewish people also have a mission, which is to keep the world a civil place and a place with keeping the 7 Noahide laws. Then that is their mission, and by keeping that they have a share in the world to come. That's their mission. So we have different missions, but they work hand in hand. Both of them work together. But specifically, the Jewish people, we have a much more a mission with a lot more responsibility, which is the reason why they say when converts come, they try to push them away to say, are you sure you want to come and take on all this extra responsibility? You don't need to, because being a non-Jew, you are just as important, and you have an equally important mission to do. It's not like other religions that believe that people who are not of their religion are worthless. That's why we don't seek converts, unlike other religions, because we believe that other people have a purpose. They don't have to be Jewish to have a purpose, but Jewish people do have a very distinct purpose, and it's a bigger responsibility. So yeah, that's the story.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, still pondering, I'm still not sure